Things change quickly in the playoffs. Just ask the Thunder, who were cruising to a fifth straight playoff win in Game 1 against the Nuggets, but are now staring at a 1-0 series deficit and a must-win Game 2. The Thunder tried to ice the contest by playing the foul game rather than relying on their league-best defense. It's generally accepted that the best course of action is to foul when leading by 3 and the shot clock turned off, as the opposing team is less likely to win a free throw shooting contest by 3+ points than it is to make a three-pointer. But the Thunder were committed to fouling too early rather than allowing the Nuggets to burn some clock. At one point, Denver was forced to inbound the ball under their own basket, down 3 with 11 seconds left, no timeouts remaining, and Nikola Jokic on the bench, and OKC still elected to foul immediately rather than just defending the three-point line. The stoppage allowed Jokic to re-enter the game. After a couple Aaron Gordon free throws and a pair of missed freebies by Chet Holmgren, Russell Westbrook rushed up the court and found Gordon for the game-winning triple. Consider it karmic justice for playing with fire. The Nuggets might have cashed a triple on the previous play in question if the Thunder had let them play it out. But I'd rather trust my top-ranked defense to get one stop than take my chances with the best player on the planet back on the floor. Jokic's brilliance demands a real-time recalibration of best practices, like Barry Bonds drawing an intentional walk with the bases loaded. The Thunder refused to budge or deviate from their original plan. Jokic himself didn't make them pay for it, but they still got what they deserved. And with that, welcome to the Unfiltered Show from theScore Studios. My name is Joseph Casciaro. Joining me in studio today, some of theScore's finest. We've got Chicco, Nacion, and Scott Campsall. Fellas, what's going on?
Thanks for having us, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has been a minute. It's been a few minutes. Speaking of minutes, bad minutes for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's talk about that.
Look at the segue master at work.
That was a terrible segue. I managed that segue about as well as the Oklahoma City Thunder managed the last minute.
And there he is. Yeah. That's why he's the host of the show, guys.
But in all seriousness, you guys heard my take on it. What is your take on how the Thunder managed that game? What's your take on the general debate between foul up 3 or defend? Chicco, start with you. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I don't have a problem fouling up 3. We've seen it happen so many times where teams just get burned.
Yeah.
Allowing teams to just have that chance to shoot a 3, but they started fouling, I think, 30 seconds left. Like, I've never seen it so aggressively applied. And I know post-game, I think Shea may have touched on, like, the analytics, and it's something they've done all year, but to do that so early made no sense for me as well. And then the fact that you gave him a chance to bring that ball up. When Jokic was on the bench, at least worst case scenario, they get a 3, they tie the game. You still have a timeout remaining. You still have a chance, last possession, to send the game at overtime, at home, home crowd behind you. So that was even more baffling. So when Gordon went to the line, he made those 2 free throws, and then they used their last time out there. I'm like, you're putting a lot of pressure on your shooters to make their foul shots. Yeah. And, obviously Chet's first playoffs, you never know. Things can happen. Nerves, obviously he's been in big moments before, but, you basically set yourself up for that fine margin of error when you do something like that.
Yeah, to me, this feels like such a take, but it's such a sign of a sort of immature playoff team to not, and I don't necessarily put this on the players, like this is probably more of a coach thing, but just to not have the situational awareness.
Yes.
To be like, okay, yes, this is a thing we've done all season long. Yes, this is a strategy that has worked for us, but have some situational awareness to audible the play for all the reasons you guys talked about. Denver shooting pretty bad from 3 in the game also, which I think is, important. Jokic not on the floor is important. It's like, hey guys, why don't we take a second here and audible on this play? Trust your defense, trust your elite defense, and play the game out. And to me, that's a thing that happens once in this game. I'd be shocked if it happened again. I think that's a learning experience. It's a game 1. It sucks to lose a game 1 because of something like this. But to me, that is one of those, like, the difference between a absolute been there before championship caliber team and an aspirational championship caliber team, which the Thunder are right now. And I think it's little things like that that make a massive difference.
Great point. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this on the show before. I had wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. The Thunder, even though they were the 1 seed last year, they won a playoff series last year, they still entered this playoffs as the youngest team in the playoff field, or at least had the youngest rotation in the playoff field. I think they were still the second least experienced team in the playoff field. And if they were to go on and win it, would become the youngest champions of all time if you just look at the rotation. So fair point in that even though they've already had a little bit of success with this core, they are still really, really inexperienced when you compare them to teams that traditionally go deep and win titles. And I think that probably played a part here. And yeah, like I'm team foul up 3. I usually am. But to your point, to both your points, like to not have that situational awareness and not be willing to bend a little bit, like to be so rigid and just be like, nope, this is what we do. And this is what we know the math says is usually right. And so we're going to keep doing it. It's like, that's Nikola Jokic sitting over there on the bench, and their team doesn't have any timeouts, and they got to go the length of the floor. And yeah, 11 seconds is a lot, but worst case scenario, they just tie it. And again, you have the best defense in the league. You've got the best league-adjusted defense of the 2020s. One stop, that's all you need. Defend the three-point line. You know they need a 3. And to still be so in your own head where you're like, no. Doesn't matter. None of that matters. This is what we do.
We foul.
Immediately foul.
Yeah, we foul.
It's just like, again, like I said, even though Jokic himself didn't burn them, I really think they got what they deserved, and it was like some karmic justice for just how rigid they were, how unwilling they were to adapt to the situation. Don't think they'll make that mistake again. Having said that, maybe it won't matter. Like maybe they won't have another chance. It's only 1-0. I still think the Thunder win this series, but you got to take advantage of any break you get in the playoffs, and blowing a double-digit lead in the final few minutes against the Nuggets. Now instead of 4-7, now you got to win 4-6 against the best player in the world. Like the margin for error decreases. I really think they botched this one.
Yeah, the Nuggets were coming off a 1-day rest period. Like this was the game that that was probably going to be most in the bag for them.
Yeah,
and now they're going to be more refreshed coming into Game 2. They're going to be riding that momentum. And all the pressure's on OKC now to win Game 2 and, not go to altitude, go to Denver down 0-2. That could be tough.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Just like it's such a cliche to say that the playoffs, it really does come down to like a bounce or two. So it's fascinating to your point how much the dynamics of the series, especially now, change just on that one game. Like obviously if OKC wins Game 2, they go, you go back to Denver, it's tied, like you can reset things a little bit, but there is a pressure to win Game 2.
Oh yeah.
If they go out 2-0 having lost both those games at home to like the 4th seed, like it's not, and like you said, all the pressure's on them all of a sudden. It is like a very crazy how that decision essentially could shift the whole dynamic.
Changed everything in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, that's I think enough of actual playoff talk. Just we got a weekly show here, and we try to go into every series. It's going to be a little dated by the time some people watch this. So let's talk a little bit about some teams that are already out of the postseason mix and teams that are already looking forward to next year and beyond. And we'll start with a player who's looking towards next year and beyond, and that's Luka Doncic. So obviously everyone knows everything that went on with Luka this year, the most turbulent season of his career, involved in the most shocking trade of our lifetimes. Do either of you view Luka Doncic differently today as a Lakers star after everything that happened this year than you did a year ago when he was leading Dallas to the finals?
I don't think I see him that differently. I feel like maybe, obviously, there's talks always going to be about his conditioning, but I think that might be a little bit overblown considering like every summer this guy's almost playing for the Slovenian national team, whether it's the World Cup, the Olympics, Eurobasket. Like there's a lot of basketball this guy plays all year, and that's unfortunately he's so committed to playing for his country and getting them the best results possible that's going to wear you down, and that unfortunately carries into the NBA season where he hasn't been able to play. I think he's played more than 70 games only twice. By
the way, he is expected to play for Slovenia this summer at Eurobasket.
Yeah, so I mean the rest is the grind does not stop for Luka Doncic. But yeah, the defense probably obviously everyone's going to highlight that. The lapses he has, the effort. It's frustrating because no one expects Luka to be this amazing perimeter stopper, but I think you expect him to have at least a better effort on the floor and at least kind of try and give it your all out there.
Second half of Game 5 against the Wolves when he had the bad back and he could barely move, he was barely worse mobility-wise on the defensive end than he was healthy in the first 4.5 games.
He didn't look much different.
Yeah.
And then the last part, and you wrote about this earlier in the week, is I think the biggest gripe is just the constant complaining. Like he's constantly looking to the refs for a foul almost every other possession. Call doesn't go his way, he's looking to the bench to challenge it. And it's like at some point you have to take some accountability for yourself. You got to just put it in the rearview mirror and just concentrate on the present at hand because handful of times where he'd be complaining to the ref and he's not hustling back on defense in transition, and the other team just scores.
Yeah. So since Luka made his debut in 2018, he's third in free throws per game, first among non-bigs in free throws per game. Cleaning the glass is sorts things by like percentiles and stuff. In terms of guards and wings, he's been between the 85th and 98th percentile in drawing shooting fouls every season of his career. The woe is me act with the refs grew old long time ago. He gets calls, and refs are not going to get every single call right, but Luka is like one of the last people who can be complaining about it. The amount of every ounce of energy, physical and mental, is precious in the journey, in the grind to a championship, right? Like the 8-month journey from October to June. Stop wasting it on literally every single, and I mean it, every single officiating decision made in every minute you're on the court, because that's what he does.
It's like every other possession.
It's insane.
I don't think I'm exaggerating.
No, you're not. And to be honest, this is my biggest gripe. But we can talk about the defense, the conditioning, some of Nico Harrison's concerns, but this has always been my biggest gripe with Luka, is that every athlete in some way has officiating complaints, but with Luka, it's like an unbearable extreme. And he just wastes so much energy on it. How many times do we see his team running back on defense and he's still halfway up the court because he's got to argue with the refs about something that just happened on the offensive end? It's like, if it's annoying for us to watch, how grating is it for his teammates that are, he's supposed to be in the trenches with?
Yeah. I mean, that's a totally fair point. I think, I can't disagree with you there. I think just to your larger question, personally, I kind of didn't expect the Lakers to honestly be as competitive as they were after they traded for Luka. I thought that this is a team that's constructed to be a certain way. You've completely had to remake it to get Luka, which is a trade you make. It's a trade I would make 100 times out of 100. So I'm really, the fact that they played so well in the regular season, finished as high as they did in the seeding, and got into the playoff series, I think was all kind of gravy. To me, until I see Luka Doncic play for a Lakers team that is constructed to maximize his successes, listen, does this guy try on defense 100% of the time? Obviously not. Usually it takes him a couple games to get burned, and then he's out there giving a little bit of effort. But is he going to look a lot different when he's got, a defensive center behind him that's going to, make up for some of those mistakes? Dude averaged 30 points a game in the series on, I think, 45% shooting, 34 from three, which are all much smaller sample size, but on par, a little bit better than his playoff stats last year. This is a guy who is your offense. I think the complaining is a totally separate issue, and I do agree that is something. But I just think you take this supreme talent, you surround him with guys that are going to maximize him, and then we can talk about it. If they go out and they make some moves this summer and they come back next year and we get the same result, and it's like, well, Luka didn't hold up his end of the bargain, sure. You played dude 45 minutes in one of the games. You played him the entire second half in one of the games. I don't really think you can sit and then be like, I can't believe how tired this guy is. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
It's like, no shit, he's tired. He's taking all the shots. He's running the whole offense. You know what I mean? It's like, give me JJ Redick with a offseason to plan around his new team. Give me some adjusted roster, and then, let's talk about his shortcomings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I agree. I think, to me, I view Luka pretty much the exact same way I did a year ago. There's just more to talk about now because he was traded in the season and
to the Lakers.
He's always
to
played
the
the
Lakers.
Lakers.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy who traded him, has made it more of a thing about some of it, his deficiencies. But he's a high volume offensive engine who plays all year round. For his in the playoffs has such a burden, plays a lot of minutes. So I don't expect Luka Doncic to ever be a great defender, even a good one. But I think he can be something closer to average with the right defensive infrastructure around him after an offseason where he's maybe refreshed. And we saw that in Dallas's finals run last year. He was an average defender, and that's fine. That's all you need from him, and the Lakers will gladly take that based on the way he tilts the floor on the other end. The conditioning stuff, I think, is overblown because, one, listen, you just have to accept he's never going to look like an elite athlete. He's just not that kind of body. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he's in great shape. No, he can get better. Yeah, he can get in better physical shape. His conditioning can get better. But this year, fine, he had the calf issue, and there's, the reports that Nico Harrison thought a more catastrophic injury was going to come sooner or later because he doesn't take care of his body. The fact is, since his debut, he's averaged 66 games per 82. He's played 80% of games. He's played 55 of 58 playoff games. Shoulder's a crazy burden. plays all summer with the Slovenian national team, and is still there pretty much every game, 80% of the time. So I don't really buy the conditioning stuff. It's like, sure, is it possible if he's not treating his body right, the wear and tear will add up? I guess, but like there's not actually much evidence so far that his durability is a concern other than the incompetent executive who traded him thinking so. So like that's kind of my take on it. Is I understand why we're talking more about this stuff now. There's a reason I put it as a topic for today's show. But I think if you actually take everything into account, I don't think he's any different of a player than he was last year. I still think if like every executive in the league could start a franchise from scratch right now, there's at maximum like 3 to 5 guys max that you would take over him. And I think Lakers get a center, some better defenders around him. He'll be better on that end next year too.
Yeah, like you said, they had like what 30 games or so to kind of figure things out on the fly. And the fact that they were able to get a 3rd seed should be honestly pretty encouraging. And you kind of go from there back to the drawing board this summer.
Yeah.
Okay, you can actually watch more of my thoughts on the Luka Doncic situation in this Friday's episode of Unfiltered. You know the deal, me talking to a green screen, talking to you for 5 minutes, ranting to you. You can watch that on Friday. I want to move on to another star who has some questions around him, not about his play, but about his future and where he'll land, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. So the Bucks were eliminated in the first round for a 3rd straight year. The 4th straight year since they won the championship that injuries in some way have derailed them. But if we're being honest, they haven't looked that great in most of the season since they won the title. We know the situation with Dame. You know, I'm assuming he's going to be out all of next year. Best case scenario, maybe he can come back for a playoff run, but I feel like that's asking a lot.
And who are you getting back at that point also?
Exactly.
He's still got to ramp up.
Exactly. In his mid-30s as a small guard. Like, so I don't think they should go into next season expecting anything from Dame. No. They got to bring back Brook Lopez or not, but even if they don't bring him back, they still are capped out. All they have is their like non-taxpayer mid-level exception to use. They can get like a $14 million player. But realistically, they do not have enough in terms of cap flexibility, assets, young talent to go get a player to help Giannis get over the hump again in Milwaukee. I think their next tradable picks are in 2031 and then 2032 once this draft's over. Obviously not a great situation. You
it's
add
tough.
all that up. Yeah, it's very tough.
It's tough.
Well put.
You add all that up, I think if it was any other star, you'd be like, he's gone. Giannis, we know how committed he has been to Milwaukee. We know that every time this comes up, he ends up re-upping there. But the difference being that the other couple times that all these questions came, the Bucks were able to get a Drew Holiday, to get a Dame Lillard. They do not have the goods to do that again. So the question becomes, is Giannis gone? Is this finally, after all the years of being like, oh, this is the year he might ask out, is this actually the year everything comes to a head and Giannis decides Milwaukee is no longer for him?
I honestly think this is, like, he's got to take a long look. I think, like, you saw him, the amount of effort he put in that Game 5 loss to the Pacers, the numbers he put in that game, and yet they blew a lead in catastrophic fashion, and it wasn't enough, and they still lost the series in 5 games, and it was clear that, all this, as great as the individual game he had, clearly it wasn't going to be enough, even if they won that game, to probably win the series, because to be even in that game, they needed Gary Trent. Yeah. They needed these guys to just go off and have ridiculous games of their lives to be able to do that. So I think he has a series like that, and he has some time to kind of reflect on current position of the team. No Lillard for next year. He's entering, I think he's got 2 years left on the contract. He's still in his prime. Like, he's a competitor, and I think he's shown that throughout his career, and I think he might even have a conversation with Dame Lillard, a guy who stayed in Portland a long time, and have some real talks about, obviously in a perfect world, Dame would love to play with Giannis. But I think Dame is kind of a guy that, he didn't get, obviously Giannis has a ring, but Dame never got a chance at this point to win a championship. They're going to have real honest conversations about, like, do you want to have any regrets for, the rest of your career if you don't at least try and pursue it elsewhere? So in short, I do think this is, with everything, the lack of assets, the lack of flexibility, I think everything is just kind of aligned for it to actually happen this time, even though he's been so loyal to the franchise. Yeah,
I agree. Scott, so what do you think? Do you think one championship and being the, like, forever one franchise guy is enough for Giannis, or you think he craves more and the only place to get it is elsewhere?
I mean, it's tough to say what he thinks, to be honest with you. I think, in my opinion, one championship in one city, being the guy who was like, I'm going to stay here, I'm not going to go, we're going to figure this out. In a small market. Like, how many years has he been in the league?
I think now it's about, has it been 12 already? 13?
I would
Something
buy
like that.
Yeah. Whatever. We're talking double digits. Like that in today's day and age, that is the equivalent of spending your career in one place. Yeah. So I think he has done more than he doesn't owe Milwaukee shit anymore.
Agreed.
That's the main thing. And I think if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, let's flip this around. Like Damian Lillard was the emergency eject button. Like he was the last guy. It was like, maybe if we trade him, we can get a pick and a young player, and that rolls this forward. Him with the injury, that's out. They have zero pathway going forward. If I'm Milwaukee, I go to this guy and I say, listen, we're not going to waste your prime. Like, you're 30 years old now. You are just entering, believe it or not, like the actual prime years of your career. Like, the only way we can restart this franchise and be competitive is if we trade you. So, if you want to stay, that's fine. We'll do whatever you want. But like from a Milwaukee perspective, like you have to trade this guy. You have no other choice. What are you going to do? Barely make the playoffs and get eliminated every single year? Hope that maybe you don't even have draft picks. So it's not even like maybe we get a second round pick that ends up being good. It's like maybe we could trade an end of the roster guy to get a second round pick that we hit a home run on. Like
maybe no one saw Kyle Kuzma missing every layup he attempted in the playoffs, and maybe we can turn him into a player as good as, like, I don't know, Chris Middleton.
Yeah.
Which
that's the thing, right? It's like Kuzma's like maybe the only other guy that they were like, okay, we go get this guy. Maybe you get something. But it's like, nope, dude is also a zero.
Yes.
So like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean?
And to be fair, obviously I understand. I know Bucks fans will be all over that. Yeah, they made that deal to get under the second apron. I get all that. But they also have to accept, fine, they got under the second apron. But that deal is also what completely brought any hope of a championship ceiling crumbling down. Like, they got under the second apron. They still could have been competitive. They were not winning a championship once that deal went through. Once they replaced Chris Middleton with Kyle Kuzma, like a guy who, when healthy, is still an elite tough shot maker for a guy who can't even be an easy shot maker. Like,
boy, I mean,
he was a big difference maker during that championship run. Yeah, and you have to also think from you talk about Giannis and the loyalty. Like Middleton's probably one of his closest teammates.
Yeah,
so you've got to wonder, when they trade Middleton away, how that kind of affects him and his desire to stay there, because that's someone he practically spent his entire career alongside.
Yeah, and like from a relationship standpoint, it's like that's a trade you make if you're like, okay, like we got to trade this guy, but we're getting someone back that can really help us. And it's kind of like best case scenario for Kuzma. Also, when you were talking about his playoff run, you said that he was a difference maker, and I laughed because I thought you were saying he was a difference maker the opposite way for the Bucks. Like he just killed them. Yeah. He was out there having I think more than one cardio night.
Yeah. But he was the MVP of that series, the most valuable pacer.
Yeah, I like that. Which is just to say, like, you at best we'll get a guy that like maybe gives you a couple good games in a series and gives you a chance to like losing 6.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the ceiling on that trade was low. There's just nothing. Like any way you look at it, there's no pathway forward other than wasting Giannis's prime years or trading him.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that it's time. It's finally time for him to go, and this will be the summer he actually asks out. Scott, we'll start with you this time. Ooh. Where do you want to see him land?
Okay, for sheer, like, just you love asking me these questions because I'm always like, what's going to confuse him? But I want to see from a sheer, just like, because it would be so fascinating to see OKC crashes out in the playoffs and goes, hey, we've got 11 first-round picks in the next 3 years. We can make this trade happen without giving up, like, Chet or J-Dub. Like, I think Isaiah Joe, Hartenstein, and Aaron Wiggins, salary-wise, gets it done. Yeah. If you're the Bucks, obviously you're trying to get somebody, and I think there's 2 big competition teams, but could you imagine throwing him on OKC, even if it's a situation where they say, hey, we're going to play you at center and we're going to have you as a roving big man and just pick and roll the shit out of teams? Yeah. Like, I just watching that game to game would be appointment viewing. Yeah. So like that's a situation that I am hoping happens.
Chico, before we get to yours, I'll just add that I'm on board with that. Thunder are my pick too. And what I would find so fascinating about it is like this would be 9 years after Kevin Durant spurned Oklahoma City to join the 73-win Warriors after they had just flamed out in the finals. And now 9 years later, if the 68-win Thunder are the team that are creating their like new generational superpower by stealing a guy like 30-year-old MVP caliber superstar from a fading contender. I think there'd be just like so much there to make that like appointment viewing, obviously, because they'd be a super team, but also just like the parallels with OKC losing a guy to a similar situation 9 years ago, and now everything comes full circle, right?
Yeah. Think of the athletic articles we'll get out of that.
It's the score app. Where we find the articles. Chico, where do you want to see Giannis land? Are we going 3 for 3? You got him in Oklahoma City?
I would not pick Oklahoma City, but like you got to think with OKC, like they got to trade these picks at some point. Right? You're not going to be taking a player for every single one of those. It seems like an endless boatload of first-round picks. I don't know how feasible this would happen, but just from a visual perspective, like the idea of a front court with Wemby and Giannis, I think would be pretty awesome to watch. Also, two of the most biggest international players on the same team. You probably get Chris Paul probably come back there and just kind of be the backup to Aaron Fox. Like
I like that.
I think it'd be pretty cool to see. I mean, there's obviously going to be some pieces. People are going to involve picks, but I think the idea of Giannis and Wemby and just seeing teams trying to go against all that length and size would be a pretty entertaining watch.
I think that would be incredible.
No, I'd love to see that. Yeah, great pick.
A couple of European freaks in the front court. That'd be awesome. One note on your Thunder note about how, like, because I agree with you, they have all these first rounders, but like they can't play, they can't pick someone for every year they've got a pick or multiple picks and then actually play them, especially if they're going to be a really good team for a few years. I guess the counterpoint would be, and I think something Sam Presti has talked about too, is, well, they actually could, because like in an apron world, you want guys on cheap, controllable contracts to balance your big stars. So I think there are still like more conservative-minded with the picks. Thunder fans will be like, no, we just keep the picks. Like, we're already a contender, so just keep all those picks. And instead of like bumping up against the second apron, you just slowly replace older guys with guys on rookie scale contracts. But I think there's a limit to that. And to your point, they have so many extra picks that it would literally be impossible for a good team to play that many young guys, to even have that many young guys on the roster. So at some point, that consolidation trade is coming.
Like, how many guys 100%. Are going to be draft and stash?
Exactly.
Like you can't just keep doing this every single year. At some point, you got to push those chips on the table. I thought there was, honestly, 1 year, like, I mean, it probably would have never happened, but like, what if they actually tried to make a play for Wemby? Like, I feel like that would have been the year you would have tried to. I mean,
what if they tried
San
to make
Antonio.
a play for Kevin Durant?
Well, I mean,
now you a full circle.
Now you could get it with you probably wouldn't have to. I mean, you certainly wouldn't have to give up as much as you would for Giannis to get KD at this point. But I think, apologies.
No, go ahead.
I think that this summer is going to be so fascinating for all of these reasons. I don't want to step on our next segment, but I just think there are so many teams.
Segue us there.
Well, okay. Well, if we want to talk about, I think the Houston Rockets are another team that are absolutely fascinating, because you have these teams, and I would put OKC in this kind of group, where you have these teams like Houston and OKC that have all these picks, have all these assets, but are also competitive. Obviously in two different positions. Thunder already elite. Houston now is kind of like, look at us. Yeah. We made it here. We're at this step. How do we go to this step without blowing everything wide open, And I think you're going to get a summer where you're going to get guys like KD, Giannis, potentially Booker. I think there's another trade one out there that's not coming to mind. But couple of these big guys where it's like, if you're Houston or OKC, you have to make a decision as to whether or not, like, to what degree are you willing to trade these guys? If you're Houston, is Sengun a foregone conclusion that you trade him? Would you trade him for Giannis but not KD? Like, these teams are in such interesting positions, especially if OKC doesn't win the title, that I think this summer is going to be crazy, because it's like I said, OKC could make a trade just for picks. They could say that's not good enough, we need a player, and then it's like, do they go to the Spurs if the Rockets aren't willing to do it and the Thunder aren't willing to do it? And I think that's going to make like where these guys land like so fascinating.
Agreed. And what I think makes the Rockets fascinating is like, okay, when we talk about OKC, for example, they're already this 68 win juggernaut. Their big three is perfectly balanced, like guard, wing, big, all two-way players. They have shot creation, they have shooting, they have defense, they have everything. What I find so interesting with Houston is, like, it's very obvious the one thing that they need shot creation and like a real shot maker, like a championship level shot creator, shot maker. You plug that guy in, that team can win a title. I mean, like, their defense is that good. Their general balance is that good. And
Udoka's been to a finals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like,
point.
Coaches in place.
right. Everything's there except that shot creator, like a very specific mold of player that will complete the puzzle. And there will be guys out there like Kevin Durant, we know, is going to be on the market. You know, Phoenix says Devin Booker won't be on the market, but I still believe if the offer's good enough and Phoenix really takes a hard look at where they are, maybe you can pry Book out of Phoenix, and that would complete the Rockets. But then at the same time, it's like, well, if a Giannis is available and like, okay, his style of play isn't what the Rockets need necessarily, but at the same time, when you're a young team so close to genuine contention, can you afford to be that choosy and be like, yeah, I mean, we could get Giannis, but he's not the type of player we need. It's like, no, you would go get him. So the Rockets fascinate me from that perspective. But there are a few Houston-related questions I want to talk to you guys about, I want to ask you about. So we kind of just talked about some guys they could target. First and foremost, Chicco, if you're running the Rockets, all these guys are available, and you could have your pick of them, you know, which is the guy that you think is the absolute priority one top target that Houston should be going after? No holds barred this summer.
Yeah. Probably I'd say Devin Booker for me. I mean, there's been already links to them. Like when they got their picks back in that Brooklyn deal over the summer, that odd deal that sent the Windhorse meme out there. There were a lot of dots kind of connecting the Rockets with Devin Booker. And I think you can get a guy like that who's young, who's in his prime years, and be able to add that to, you know, a team that's, like you said, they're looking for that half-court creator.
Yep.
That was a rough watch this series, watching this team just struggle to put up points because the defense is elite. Like, you saw the way they defended. They made Steph work really hard to get his points when he struggled in Game 7. And so if you can add that piece, I think Devin Booker for me would make sense with the time frame and the age. And obviously Houston has the assets, right? They got the picks, they got the young players to potentially make that happen.
They have the Suns picks that the Suns could want
exactly
back.
right.
Yeah. And I just think it makes too much sense for those two to just kind of work something out. Whether it's Durant or whether it's Booker, like, I just find it hard to ignore that something between those two teams won't happen. And, you know, we're talking about the different young teams that we have right now that may face, you know, some deep questions in the offseason, like OKC or Houston. I think you just have to look at a team like Memphis, who a few years ago, you know, John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and you thought with that young three over there, I think they got the 2 or 3 seed a few years back, and you kind of thought the world's their oyster.
Yep.
They're going to be contending. They're going to be the team to watch. And a few years later, you know, time goes to show that things just aren't guaranteed. And young stars who you think are going to be on the rise, going to get better, development kind of stalls, and like obviously certain things happen in Memphis. But I think this summer, when those young teams, if they do fall short, like in OKC, for example, and they ask themselves, is it worth risking mortgaging, you know, the long-term future to go all in on the guy right now? I think you're going to have to look at what happened to Memphis, and that's going to influence some decision-making.
I think that's a great point. Anyone who's like followed along with my content over the years has probably either heard me say this or see me write this or whatever like 100 times, but I'll keep saying it. Teams never realize until it's too late that what they think is their first great chance sometimes ends up being their last chance or their best chance. You can go back to OKC in the finals back in 2012, the Grizzlies that you're talking about now. You know, the Bucks ended up winning one, but I felt that way about that team when they lost to the Raptors in that conference finals. And like, okay, everything worked out for them. But even at the time, I was thinking, it was like, you know, Bucks fans just think this is the beginning of something, and it ended up being the case. But you can't get too far ahead of yourself and think, we'll be here for the next 4 or 5, 6 years. You just never know. A trade, an injury, whatever. So take advantage of the opportunity when you have it. Sticking with the Rockets, they've got a couple players. Like, Alperen Sengun is a 22-year-old all-star and seems to be the franchise guy. But my money's on Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson, to me, is their guy, full stop.
Yep.
Two-way superstar in the making, all over the court, getting better offensively, good enough already defensively in his early 20s to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Am I wrong? Do either of you disagree that if it ever came down to it, and I'm not saying they have to pick between those two guys. I think they can build a great team with both of them. But if they had to, at some point, pick one of those guys, I think it should be Thompson. Am I crazy?
I mean, I think it's like in a vacuum, I think it's Thompson, right? Like, and if you were ever unsure of that, because you watch that playoff series and you're like, this guy came on in all of the ways that anybody who's been watching him play saw throughout the regular season. So I think it's Thompson. Where I think that conversation happens is it's not in a vacuum. It's like, we have a shot to get Giannis. We have one shot to get Giannis. We have to give up Thompson. Do we like our team enough? And it doesn't have to be Giannis. It can be player, whoever. You know, does this trade make us good enough that we're willing to part with this guy? And that's where I think you have the conversation about maybe trading somebody like that. But to me, that's the only situation. Because I think in that trade, if I'm getting Giannis, I would probably, again, depending on the rest of the package, I would trade Sengun probably every single time and not Thompson 0% of the time. But there's an argument to be made that if they replicate enough of each other's games that maybe the fit is a little bit better. But if you're going player by player, there's no, it's Thompson 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, it's crazy because like a year ago, if you were to pose that same question, I think Sengun's probably the easy answer. And now you see it's just his second year in the league. Still 19, 20 years old.
20, I think, 21.
The crazy part is like these guys, him and his brother, they came from overtime lead. I don't think anybody really knew what to kind of expect. Like they were the big wild cards of the draft. And you can see both of them, especially Amen Thompson, just taking off this year and obviously being a two-way force on both ends. If you had some shooting, that'd be great. But I mean, what you saw in that playoff series, I think it's hard not to think that, all right, this is the guy who can build around. But like, again, we talk about trying to maximize their windows. And like, you float a possibility of you have a chance to get Giannis and they're asking for Amen Thompson. It's like, do you do it? Like, do you pull the trigger and make that deal? And it seems
tough.
easy to say, like, of course, 100%, because nothing's guaranteed in this league. But, just the way you see him, he's only 19. It's like, what if he is the next Giannis, right? And you let him walk out the door. Like, that's going to be something that will be bugging Rockets fans for a long time.
Last Rockets question, Chicco. Hate to do it every time you're in here because we know you're a big Jalen.
I knew this was
Jalen
coming.
Green guy.
I knew this was coming.
We talked months ago about the potential Jalen Green problem in Houston. Now they've been eliminated. They got the data they wanted, right? Like all year, the Rockets saying, no, we're not going to make the all-in move this year because we want to see this young team in the playoffs, collect data from that. I think the data they should have been collecting from the playoffs is the data that you could have collected from Jalen Green's first few regular seasons in the league, and that's that. Look, man, this guy, I'm not arguing that there isn't talent in there. I've said before, in his bag, Twitter loves the guy because, he's got some moves, he's got some handle, and once in a while he'll pop off and you'll be like, oh, I see something there. But if we're just going by the overall package or lack of package he's shown as an NBA player, we're talking about a guy who doesn't do enough, doesn't impact the game in any way really when he doesn't have the ball, when he's not scoring. But when he does have the ball and he is scoring, it's inefficiently 9 times out of 10. And you just can't win with a guy like that being one of your top players. So the question is, can the Rockets win with Jalen Green? Because here's the problem, too, with Jalen Green. I don't think Jalen Green recognizes that, right? And that's fine. A lot of athletes don't have self-awareness. But, like, it's one thing if we're talking about a player like that being, like, the 6th or 7th man and finding a role maybe as a 6th man eventually, whatever. But Jalen Green doesn't see himself like that. And he's early enough in his career where he's not going to accept something like that yet. So based on the fact that he sees himself as, franchise cornerstone early in his career, and he just can't be that for a winning team, just like I was asking about Giannis on a much different scale, is this finally the year where you think the Rockets confront this Jalen Green problem?
This series, as a proud Filipino, it's tough to kind of come to this reality. But this series was very concerning. This playoff series was very concerning.
But not the end of the road for you.
The fact that,
he is
obviously,
young.
He is young. You can live with the fact that it's your first playoff series and you're not putting up the numbers that you'd want, but the lack of aggression or at least trying to hunt and seek shots, I think is the big red flag. It's obviously like there might be nerves, but like if you want to be, one of the faces of the franchise, if you want to take that next step, you can't be afraid of the moment. And if you're obviously going to struggle in your first ever playoffs, at least go down swinging, right?
Yeah.
And for him, like it just kind of felt he was too passive. He wasn't hunting his shots. And then we have these stretches every year where he has these patches of like 20 to 30 point games. He puts like 10 or 15 in a row. It's like, all right, maybe we're turning a corner here. and then he'll have like an 8-point night right after that stretch, and it'll just be this maddeningly inconsistency. And
the
it's
playoff series was honestly kind of like that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
that
like
one
game where he was incredible,
Yeah.
and then he was just brutal the rest of the time.
and he was hunting his shots in that
Yeah.
game. Like he was getting dribble handoffs. He was taking threes like more often than he has the entire season. I think that was a career high for him in terms of threes, like regular season or a playoff game. But yeah, I think that the fact that like he wasn't as aggressive, he just didn't seem like he was at least going down swinging. I think that's kind of a concern. And we talk about the Rockets needing that creator, that shot creator in the half court set. Like he could fill that role theoretically, but you know the inconsistency, the not being able to kind of just be in attack mode. I think, especially with this series, has kind of proved that maybe he's not the long-term answer for that. But he could be elsewhere. Like, we don't know right there.
Yeah,
in the
fair.
right system,
Yep.
he's still, 21, 22 years old. It's hard to give up on talents like that. But I'm not sure it's in Houston.
Before we get to Scott's point on Jalen Green, I was just going to say, because you said, it could happen elsewhere, it could happen in the right system. I'm not trying to pile on, but when I watch Jalen Green, and I think of like, where's this guy he's gonna be the ultimate like Washington Wizard or something like that. Like Jalen Green is gonna have a couple of great years.
So mean,
He's gonna have like a couple great years where he puts up like decent on like a really bad team. Because again, I just think for Jalen Green to be the player that he wants to be, to have the ball as much as he wants, it's gonna have to be on a bad team.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm wrong. Because I got nothing. He's a young 20-something-year-old. It seems like a nice kid. I've got nothing against him other than his game.
Yeah, other than everything he does when he touches a basketball.
On the basketball court.
I was just going to go back to, I think kind of the 2 points that Chicco made there at the end are kind of like the reasons that you would be, it's kind of 3 points, but if you're the Rockets, the thing is like what you need the most, theoretically, he can do. He's just not doing it at the level you want.
Exactly.
So I think that is also like a big factor for them. Like I think, obviously the youth is the second one in terms of like whether or not you're deciding to trade him. Like I think it sucks really bad to look at him and see in him what he could be, which is everything you need. Like there's a world where he just comes back next year and is like, I guess it would be his 4th season, right? Fifth. Oh my God. Yeah, I was thinking So you get the 3rd year leap in season 5, Like it's just like that's what makes it so frustrating, I guess, is because he is potentially capable at his best of what they need the most, which is why it's so maddening to be like, well, maybe he could be this guy. You know what I mean?
If Jalen Green was who the Rockets thought he would be, who they expected him to be, and who he thinks he is, the Rockets would not have to go get Devin Booker or Kevin Durant or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, they'd
have their big three.
Yeah, exactly.
They'd have their big three.
That's their whole thing. And also, in fairness to him, they were kind of keying on him and trying to stop him.
Fair enough.
And I think like a young guy like that, having like his first real experience with that is obviously like going to be challenging. So I think, not to defend an NBA player for trying to figure out how being defended difficult in the playoffs, but I just think like that's not helping
learning
his
curve.
case, And I think he did have the one game, which I think is enough for you to be. It really just comes down to like, I'm not saying these things are great. I just mean if I'm Houston and I'm weighing the possibility of potentially blowing up this version of my team, I think these are all factors you got to consider with it.
If you're the Bucks too, also as well, it's like you're trying to rebuild, you're trying to take swings, you're trying to take lottery tickets. And if you're able to get a young, controllable guy like that, I mean, who knows? Like if Giannis trade, maybe they demand 2 out of 3 of Thompson, Green, Sengun, whoever the Rockets decide to part with. I feel like if you're the Bucks, you have the power to set the price that high.
Yes.
And demand 1 or 2 of those guys, and it's up to the Rockets. Well, again, they face the question: is that move worth it right now to go all in on that?
If the Bucks get multiple of those guys, they could be cooking. If a Giannis trade ends up with Jalen Green as a centerpiece, the Bucks are the Wizards. All right, I'm gonna stop the bullying Chicco. This is not.
This might be my last appearance on the
but
Unfiltered
let's
show.
finish. Let's finish with some. I was gonna say like some happy stuff. It's a little somber because Gregg Popovich is no longer going to be the head coach of San Antonio Spurs. But the good news is, he's on the road to recovery. It was great to see him in that press conference. The lighthearted press conference where he ends up showing the shirt with his new title, El Jefe, instead of head coach. So let's just real quick to end this show as a little ode to the greatest coach of our generation, the greatest basketball coach of all time. Move over, Phil Jackson. Gregg Popovich. I'd like to hear either of you, both of you, 60 seconds each, or a quick either your favorite memory of Pop, watching him over the years, or maybe an interaction media-wise, or your favorite thing about him. Scott, we can start with you.
I think I want to go a little bit just kind of like this is what I thought of when I think of Popovich finally being not in the NBA anymore. And it's just like such of an end of an era in so many different ways. Like obviously, Pop is the Spurs are Pop, that's the end of an era. But I just think like the idea of having a coach come into a team, hold them accountable, hold their stars accountable, be hard-nosed, and then also sort of become the face of a franchise is such a bygone era concept. Yeah. And we will probably, we have Kerr and Spoelstra, but it's, not quite the same. Like, I don't think we'll ever have that anymore. So Pop retiring is like the end of that. But I also, when I think of Pop, I just think of like, he is this guy that contains such multitudes. Like I said, intensely competitive, very prickly with the media. I think you and I can definitely speak to a few instances of being in a scrum with him and being like, oh shit, I hope he doesn't say something to me. So mean to sideline reporters at times, but just then you hear the stories, he stands up for what he believes in, which oftentimes is, marginalized groups and underserved, groups and people that he feels are being punched down on. If you listen to anything DeMar DeRozan has ever said about Pop or written about Pop, like this is a guy with a huge heart. And I think in today's day and age, in today's media landscape with social media, headlines, like the idea that we got to know such a complicated person that was so full of different facets that is a coach in the NBA, I think is honestly amazing. And I really don't think we're going to ever know another sports person like that, especially a coach, especially somebody so great. So those two things kind of stand out to me, just like thinking about losing Pop as a coach,
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, like obviously he's got all those accolades, the all-time wins record, everything he did, the championships. But like Scott touched on earlier, I think stuff that sticks out with me regarding Pop is just the relationships he built with his players. It was beyond basketball, and you saw that with Manu and Tim being right by his side for his press conference yesterday. A lot of these guys still live in the San Antonio area, or some like work as advisors, like long before their careers are over. Like they're still somewhat tied to the Spurs organization or living in the area, and I think that's a testament to Pop and the relationships he built with them, because it was beyond basketball. Yeah. He was able to build personal relationships with players. That it's, again, like you touched on, you don't really see that much nowadays. So I think that for me is going to stand out the most about Pop.
Well said on both accounts. A couple of moments that stick out for me with Pop. Everyone has seen the famous video from 15 years ago. No, maybe more, when Shaquille O'Neal complained about Hack-a-Shaq in the playoffs the year before when San Antonio was hacking him. And then literally the first seconds of the season opener the following year, I think this was like 2008, the Spurs open with an immediate intentional foul of Shaq. And Shaq's like looking around like, what the hell? And you look at the Spurs bench and Pop's like giving him the thumbs up. Like, that's in a regular season game. And he just burned a foul literally to make a funny point. Great. And also, I think it was maybe one of their parades, maybe their last parade, when he was like on one of the parade buses and he just randomly starts doing like the count of how many championships he's won. He's like, that was great. But I want to finish it with this. And it was that my favorite thing about Pop was the perspective he had. And it's something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't expect when they're seeing a coach who's so intense, so demanding of his players, so obsessed with winning, holds his team to such professional standards, whatever. Maybe they don't think of like the fact that, no, this guy actually has perspective at the end of the day and knows that in the end, this is just a game. And I go back to when we had the podcast here at Pound the Rock, I had Matt Bonner on around the time Gregg Popovich became the all-time winningest coach in NBA history. And he talked a lot about, how Pop had this great perspective. And I asked Bonner for an example of, like, give us an example of Pop having that perspective. And Matt Bonner told this incredible story of after the Spurs blew a series lead to Oklahoma City in 2016. The Spurs were a 67-win team that year. They were the second-best team in the league behind the 73-win Thunder. They were the second-best team ever, basically, or one of them. And they end up losing this second-round series to the Thunder. And Bonner says, like, the Spurs were just devastated. They saw, there was this aging team that saw their window closing, and they just blew this opportunity. And the next day, when they're doing their exit interviews, Pop calls a meeting in the film room, and he's got a whiteboard or something, and he's got all these things written on it. And it's like the things that happened the day before. And it was like, bomb goes off in this market in this country and kills this many people. Mudslide in Peru, or like a South American country, and it kills this many people. And it had some of these things. And at the very bottom, he had basketball team from San Antonio loses basketball game to a team from Oklahoma or something like that. And I just thought, like, man, like, what perspective, right? And, like, here's this guy whose entire life is basketball. Everything he has, he owes to basketball. But he's the most successful basketball coach of all time. And in this, like, heartbreaking moment, devastating moment from a basketball perspective for his team, still has the perspective to remind them the next day, like, guys, yeah, it sucks we lost, but it's basketball. And, like, this is life, you know? And I just thought I'll always remember that. When people ask me, like, what do you think of that's what I'll always remember. Just the incredible perspective he had despite everything that basketball gave him. And yeah, that's kind of my last thoughts on the matter. I feel like that's a good way to put a bow on today's episode. Chicco, Nacion, Scott, Campsall, appreciate you both for coming through. You guys will both be on at some point again. Chicco, I promise the next time we have you on, we won't talk about Jalen Green. I promise.
You'll be booked, and the day before Jalen Green will get traded, and you'll have to talk about it.
I'll have to have my agent review this.
So for Chicco, for Scott, for Zach and Adrian in the control room, my name's Joseph Casciaro. This has been The Unfiltered Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all next week.